right now, right, we're super early, of course, right? We don't have many users yet. There's a lot of friction when it especially comes to the accessibility and a lot of other, yeah, let's say, pain points really that harm the adoption at this stage, right? At the same time, the metaverse, of course, we all know this, bears a lot of possibilities because, you know, when it comes to truly the adoption of Web3, you know, the metaverse through its gamified experiences is that pillar, right, that fosters and pushes the adoption forward. So there is kind of the tricky part right now, and that's also something that we at Metagame Up are addressing. So one of the key issues right now that's omnipresent within the metaverse, of course, is centralization, right? Everyone is talking about an open and inclusive metaverse, but if you really kind of, look behind the curtains, most of these virtual worlds, of course, still very much centralized still at this stage, right? A key point, right, to solve this is, of course, decentralized governance, but it just takes, of course, time also for users to actually adjust to this, to adopt, and to even potentially understand it, right? Because not everyone is used to these type of governance structures, so to say, while engaging in communities within the internet. Another key issue, right, is basically the lack of aggregation and interoperability. I mean, that's generally something where if you look into the Web3 space, everything is very much fragmented, right? So there is no easy navigation between the different virtual worlds, between the different dApps, and that makes it very hard because then you're always kind of trapped, so to say, within one virtual world, within one ecosystem. But you are never able to really, right now, at least at this stage, experience the full scope potential of this space, right? So that's where we, for instance, at Metagame Up, really want to be a key differentiator, really, to build a hub, right, where we aggregate the different virtual worlds. That's one of the tools we are working on right now. And if you guys have any question on this, here, Camilo is sitting in the front. He's one of our co-founders and our tech lead, so yeah, you can definitely reach out to him. And one of the key other issues that are omnipresent is the limited user experience and accessibility, right? If we all know this right now, Web3 in general is not meant for adoption and mainstream as it is in the current stage, right? So we need much more intuitive dApps where people are onboarded or even using, you know, Web3 in general, right, as a layer without having to understand it, right? It's just a seamless integration, similar to how Web2 platforms are also used at this stage. Another part is, that, of course, the lack of community, right? We all know this, that if you look at the stats of these different virtual worlds, of course, there's a huge gap between, you know, the users there. And if you look at, for instance, traditional gaming and other industries, Web2 platforms and so on. So right now, that's a huge issue, right? Because, I mean, Web3 strives from this community. Here, of course, DAOs will be a key pillar, and also traditional players, right? With a lot of communities like soccer clubs, you know, musicians and you know, these type of industries that really, you know, are driven by passion, right? And they can then kind of funnel these communities toward Web3, right? And also then, of course, establish kind of sub-DAOs or DAOs generally around their communities that, organize themselves there. And one of the last part that's really not often covered, in my opinion, when it comes to looking at the metaverse in general, is right now the lack of data utilization. Because in general in Web3, right, once data is, so to say, democratized and tokenized, and hence more tangible really also, there's a lot of opportunities, right? Imagine just using data as collateral to obtain a loan and things like this. And at the same time, data can even become a form of like universal basic income if you actually are monetizing all the data ourselves, right? That we are producing constantly. But you know, right now, that's really not possible in Web3, right? There's a couple of projects like Swash which are going into this direction, but it's something that really needs to be addressed and solved more, where we really have a gamification layer of this. When it comes to the different industries, right, you know, when you generally look at the metaverse, right, you have kind of a convergence between the crypto industry and the different arrays there. So the social, networks, right, that are brought on-chain through other platforms, of course, and also the gaming industry through the gamified experiences. But if you look at the evolutionary stage, right, you know, we like to divide it into different layers, right? I mean, that's quite common in the crypto space, where right now we're, so to say, in the layer one of the adoption curve, right? It's all about investing and building at the end of the day, right? It's not so much yet about using. sadly, of course, but that's just the case how it is. When it comes to the investing and building part, you know, that's something that we are currently really experiencing a lot. Of course, we see it with all these brands, with all these asset managers, you know, with all these different traditional players also getting into the space, right, which are all looking exactly for these two things. And that's also what we experience at Metagame Up a lot. The next layer, which we are currently moving into, so to say the layer 2, quote unquote, is so to say the layer where it's all about the applications, right? So it's really about having these intuitive dApps, right? If you remember from the previous slide, that help the users get into the space, which then, so to say, in the layer 3 allows them to actually build the communities based on the infrastructure and the application layers on top, right? And that's also the adoption curve. And today we are at the layer 1, right? Kind of moving toward the layer 2, so to say, but it just takes time, right? And I mean, we have had this adoption curve generally also within the blockchain space in general, right? If you look at, for instance, okay, first you have something like Ethereum, then you have the dApps, right? And then you have the communities that build around that. So it's quite straightforward on the one hand, but at the same time, it just, of course, requires a certain amount of time and also, utilities that are built around this ecosystem. Generally, you know, when we look at the Open Metaverse, it's quite hard to define it. This is a framework, for instance, I think by the guys from Outlier Ventures, right, which kind of are pushing, of course, also that Open Metaverse narrative. And it's quite interesting, right, because if you divide it into, apart from, so to say, these different layers that we saw here, we have here different layers also from the foundational layer, right, which is the infrastructure, the finance layer, right, which allows the usage of these different, let's say, infrastructure layers to then integrate, for instance, assets from these different, as they had quoted here, verses, right, into the DeFi space, right, and other dApps, right, and other ecosystems. And that's where also the term MetaFi comes from. I spend a lot of time also in the traditional markets working with security tokens and so on, and everyone is always trying to integrate real-world assets into DeFi, right? Whereas we have so many digital-only assets, right, from these verses, so to say, or even data, right, tokenized and things like this, which are much more straightforward to integrate into DeFi protocols, right? And that's why it's so crucial to also push that MetaFi narrative, right, forward, because MetaFi is going to be one of the key drivers, right? I'm not sure if it's going to be always called MetaFi, maybe because at the end of the day, it's just one part within the DeFi ecosystem, but I think it's definitely going to be one of the key pillars. There's not going to be, so to say, DeFi 2.0, 3.0. I think it's going to be different niches within DeFi. And one is, for instance, also DataFi, right? But MetaFi is going to be one of the key pillars there. That's really crucial. Now let's jump to the second part of it, you know, assets, infrastructure, and applications, and how we are approaching it at Metagame Up. In a nutshell, quickly to bring everyone up to speed, what we are doing at Metagame Up, right, we are kind of like a one-stop shop for the Metaverse, where we address the current needs. So we, on the one hand, develop AI models for pricing valuations of lands and other NFTs, which we then have different application layers for, on-chain for DeFi, integrations into NFT marketplaces. We leverage it for asset managers, right, for portfolio auditing and management. And also complementary to this, we develop in the different virtual roles and have building tools like a DCLEdit, for instance, for Decentraland. And so we are really focusing on that layer 2 part, if you go back to one of the previous slides, right, with the 3 layers. So that's really which we are targeting, right, to provide these respective applications for the users. And this allows us to, so to say, then become that hub for Open Metaverse experiences, so to say, for any user from the B2B and B2C side, right, to really connect the infrastructure with the dApps. So we have, as I said, right, for instance, the DCLEdit, which is one of our core tools, which was also recently used by around 16 of 20 of the builders from the Game Jam and the official Decentraland Game Jam, right? So it's going to be the #1 building tool in Decentraland because it's far more efficient than the original builder, right, that Decentraland established. And yeah, we are very proud to have that, and it's going to allow every builder kind of like a plug-and-play template-style approach to actually build there. You can test it out right now if you go to DCLEdit.com. So yeah, happy to receive your feedback on this. Apart from this, we also, of course, as I said, right, develop for B2B players, brands, and also our own community. yeah, we have pretty much a very unique ecosystem. We have a very diverse team. So yeah, we're in a good position to address this, but of course there's a lot to do. When it comes to data now, right, and how this is, so to say, an application layer within that space, there I'm going to dive a bit deeper into it. Because as I said in the beginning, data is one of these digital-only assets, right, which are, so to say, predestined to be used within DeFi, to be tokenized, to be democratized, and then hence also have this constant utility and also passive income for any user within the metaverse, right? So it's a key part that, yeah, I'm not going to mention names, but when also speaking to the different metaverses or virtual worlds, right, it's something that, yeah, we really experience an issue there, because if you ask them, for instance, how you're going to handle the data side, privacy and all these aspects, often they don't really know yet, right? And that's a key issue, because if you are really going to have this yeah, let's say adoption within the different virtual worlds akin to social media platforms and so on, right, and Web 2, then there's going to be such vast amounts of data, right? And there needs to be a straightforward standard to democratize that data and allow everyone to monetize it, right? So data is really crucial in the space, and it's one of our core focuses, I would say. Why is data relevant, right? As stated before, data, of course, and it is already an asset, right? But it's, of course, in silos, it's not accessible to people. But in general, of course, it's an asset class which can be leveraged by the users, by corporations, and also by DAOs, of course. And once data is that, let's say, tangible asset class for everyone, quote unquote, you can really push that DataFi narrative, right? And we've seen at the end of the latest, so to say, bull cycle, already a couple of projects which go into that direction. And as we know, often at least, yeah, no financial advice, but at the end of bull cycles, we kind of see what's going to be one of the key drivers in the next one. So I definitely believe that DataFi is going to be very relevant, right? Because, for instance, yeah, as I said, imagine we can use our own data that we produce just by leveraging the internet, so to say, as collateral to obtain a loan to buy a house and things like this. So it's really crucial to have the right tools in place, right, to help the users to monetize it, and so then to navigate with this data as a tangible asset class through the metaverse. And as stated before already, it's very important to also highlight the decentralized data ownership, right? Because otherwise we're going to go back to the same principles that we want to kind of move away from, right? When it comes to the Web 2 data silo approach. The anonymity is also a crucial part here, right? And we see kind of directions, or let's say, yeah, trends going into this direction. Like with the ZK chains that are launching, Polygon Hermes, for instance, right, and all these aspects. But it's, of course, something that needs to be worked on. And hence, then, all these different areas within the data space allows us to use data efficiently within that, right? Not just for leveraging it as an asset class, but also, of course, to develop AI models, because at the end of the day, it's not going to be mostly humans walking around all these vast virtual worlds. At the end of the day, it's going to be mostly bots, right? It can be sub-identities of ourselves that are connected to AI. I was speaking to a professor recently about this, right? That he can have basically a sub-identity of himself teaching in the metaverse, right, as an AI, and things like this. So it's really relevant to monetize and leverage that data efficiently. The way that we approach it at Metagame Up DAO is, right, I quickly touched on it, we have an AI model, right, that allows us, or let's say a pricing engine, so to say, that allows us to have this pricing data for NFTs, right? We initially focus on lands, right, because lands are some of the most financialized NFTs. You don't have to, quote unquote, that property issue with most of them, right, which makes it a bit more individual and harder to appraise. It's pretty straightforward, right? So we use neighboring weight techniques and other metrics right down the road, such as traffic, what is being built on top of the lands and things like this, to actually provide that fair valuation. And then you have the B2C and B2B layer, right, where from the B2B side, as stated before, right, it's of course relevant for asset managers, DeFi protocols, NFT marketplaces, right, that can leverage this. And on the other hand, from the B2C side, what we, for instance, have already live, you can check it out in our dApp, is a valuation tool, right, where you can evaluate single plots of lands, for instance, right, and you have the fair price, what we're currently about to release is a heat map, which is very cool, right? I can show you that, I think, in a second. Give me one sec here. So we have a heat map here, right, where you can basically hover over the different maps of the metaverses. You can find clusters of value, okay, whereas areas in which, for instance, the valuations are higher, right? Hence, maybe there's like some brand that has established itself there and things like this. You can see, you know, how much is it over or undervalued, right? So there's a lot of different and cool things there that allows you to make better investment decisions at the end of the day, right? And that's, of course, then from the B2C side relevant as well. Where down the road, we, as said, right, really want to focus on aggregation. To really kind of have like a search engine style for the metaverse, right? Where we can have, you know, the different assets, the valuations, kind of like you have aggregators like Booking.com, Skyscanner, and these type of platforms, right? And that allows us to really provide value to basically anyone that wants to get into the space, right? Whether it's the B2B side, which right now we are experiencing actually, for instance, in the bear market, revenue increase, right? So there's a huge demand still at this stage, or down the road, especially also from the B2C side, right? When it comes to aggregating different assets, you know, within the space also, as well as, you know, then providing the fair valuations for them to have, just a more just experience, so to say, for the users. As I said, right now, this is what's already live in our platform. The valuation tool in general, where you can see, you know, how many lands you're owning, what's the value of the land, what's the price valuation. You can have watch list features and others, right? Then you can see, okay, is the land over or undervalued? I would love to show you, right, the live demo, but I don't think it's possible. But you can check it out in our depth, as I said, right? If you go to metagameup.io, where you can really play around a bit. And if you have any questions, you can of course reach out to us. And yeah, you can really have the smartest investment decisions. So in the beginning, it was more focusing on these, let's say, individual valuations, right? That's how we started. But now, as I said, right, we are moving toward the heat map feature, which I think is going to be a key part, right, when it comes to actually, having a tool that you can gamify that is so to say ready for adoption when it comes to the B2C side as well, not just the B2B side, but right now, of course, there's more traction. And to wrap things up, right, the future outlook, I think I kind of mentioned it before already a bit, but in general, I believe that, you know, one of the key parts, right, is going to be the data part in the metaverse, right, which is going to be highlighted and far more relevant down the road. And also, I think that in general, right, the metaverse is the embodiment of adoption in Web3. There's a lot of hype right now, right? We all know this, it's normal, right, in the space, but at the same time, there's also a lot of value, right? And for us, it's about providing that value, and I appreciate you guys coming to the speech, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you, guys.